If you don't remember how to place your fingers from the last video, please go back and check that out, but we're going to assume that you do. So we're going to start from the bottom of the bagpipe scale, okay? And with all 8 holes covered, we are producing a note which on the bagpipes we're calling low G. Now, just very quickly, you're going to counter low G, low A, and high G, okay? This is something that is unique to the bagpipes because those notes, A and G, are the only ones that are repeated at a lower or a higher version. This is not something that we talk about in other instruments, and it's not really a musical thing. It is just for the purposes of disambiguation because the rest of the notes in the scale there is only one of. What this essentially means for us is that we are crossing into a second octave. If you don't know what octave means, you will learn later on, so don't worry about that. But that is just a point that you need to bear in mind. So, all holes covered, this is low G. And it should sound something like that. This is what it looks like on the music. The next note is going to be low A. Now, what we're going to do is the little finger, the pinky, on the low hand, is we're going to lift it. Now, I don't want you to lift it too far, okay? I should point out that I'm going to be exaggerating the movements of my fingers so that you can very clearly see what I'm doing on the video here, but I want you to get into the habit of when you're doing these things is to not lift your fingers too high up, okay? A maximum of maybe 3 centimeters above the chanter. Was that like an inch in old money? If you lift them too high, you're going to slow down your ability to get them back to the chanter quickly enough, okay? So don't do that. Just get into the habit of lifting them enough so that they're clear of the chanter, but no further than that, okay? And again, another thing is try not to lift them and move them too far away from the airspace of the hole. It's just a case of lifting it straight up and down. That's all we want, because we want to make our finger movements as accurate as possible so that they go up and down. Okay, so the next note, as I said, is low A, and we're going to lift our little finger up, and it sounds a little something like this. Okay, the next note we're going to do is B, and you probably guessed that involves lifting the ring finger of your bottom hand up. Again, no higher than about 3 centimeters or roughly an inch. Now, the next one is C. Okay, now you may think that it's just a case of lifting your middle finger, and you're half right, but actually what we're going to do here is we're going to take our little finger and replace it back on the lowest hole. So if I hold my fingers up and I bend these out the way, you can see what's happening here. And actually, it almost spells out the letter C. Of course, I don't want you tucking your fingers away when you do that. We're just simply going to go from there to there, and those fingers are going to sit hovering above their holes. The reason for this, for replacing this finger, as will become evident down the line, is when we get into a thing called embellishments. This is an important thing to have in place, but also it helps with tuning of the chanter. Okay, that is something that we're going to talk about far down the line. Don't worry about that, but I want to make sure that you are getting these fingerings spot on. Okay, so that is C, and it sounds like this. The next note is D, and keeping our little finger on its hole, we are lifting our index finger off. So all 3 of these fingers in the bottom hand are floating, but the little finger is staying where it is. Alright, now before we move to the top hand, I want to just quickly recap that. So all fingers down is low G, pinky up is low A, pinky and ring finger up is B, ring finger and middle finger up but pinky back down again is C, and pinky staying down but index finger up is D. Okay, and again I'm just demonstrating this so you can clearly see what I'm doing. Right? The next one on the scale, of course, is E. This one is slightly harder because it involves the most number of fingers changing at once when you move from D to E. What we're going to do is the first finger, whenever you're practicing this, I want you to make sure that the first finger that always moves is this finger, i.e. your ring finger on your top hand. So the one that my wedding ring is on. I want you to lift that first, and I'll explain why in a second. What we're then going to do is these 3 fingers from the bottom hand, they're going to go back down, and your little finger is going to come up. Okay, so let me just show you that again. We'll go back to D. So with D, we've got all of the top hand fingers down. We've got the smallest finger on our bottom hand down, and the 3 bigger fingers up. The first finger we're going to lift is our top hand ring finger. The 3 fingers on the bottom hand are going to come down, and the little finger is going to come up. Okay. Again, the reason why we're doing this is for the sake of the embellishments that we're going to look at, but also again for tuning of the chanter and getting the right pitch out of the note. The reason why I want you to lift the ring finger on your top hand first when you move from D to E is we want to eliminate something called a crossing noise. And then we're going to look at crossing noises in a second, but I want to finish showing you how to play the scale first. But a crossing noise essentially is when we get an extra note in between the 2 notes that we don't want to hear. And that is something that if you were playing in a competition, you would immediately be degraded for. Okay, so this is something to get right now. So that's E. The next note up. For every note from here, by the way, I should say that your low hand, your bottom hand, is going to stay exactly as it is now. That is not going to change. So you don't need to worry about what's going on here. As long as your little finger is up and those 3 fingers are down, you don't need to move that for any of the notes above E. The next note we're going to play is F, and we're just simply going to lift up our middle finger on our top hand. That sounds like this. The next note above that is high G, and we're going to lift our first finger off, so none of our 3 major fingers on the top hand are sitting on the chanter. Of course, we're not going to hold it out here, we're not waving, we're just hovering them above. But the thumb is staying firmly down. The last note we're going to play is high A. We're going to take our thumb off, yeah, but our ring finger on our top hand is going to go back on its respective hole. And again, the reason for that is actually primarily for tuning in this case, but the second one is just giving you a reference point so that when you're playing on the full instrument, your top hand has not gone so far away from the chanter that you can't quickly restore those fingers to where they're going to be. There's a lot of tunes and a lot of playing where you're going to jump quite frequently between high and low notes, so it's a good thing to have. Like I said, we will talk about the tuning aspects later on. We're not worried about that at this stage. Okay, so to recap that, from D, we're going to lift the ring finger on the top hand. We're going to put those 3 fingers down and lift the the small finger on the bottom hand. For F, we're going to lift the middle finger as well. For G, we're going to lift the top finger, so then none of our 3 fingers are on the front, on the top hand. And then for high A, we're going to take the thumb off, but we're going to swap it with the ring finger coming back down. And one of the things I want you to imagine actually is that there is an invisible piece of metal that sits between your ring finger and your thumb, so that whenever one of them is down, it's physically pushing the other one away from the chanter. Okay, this is the only time where that finger would be down by itself, is when you're playing high A. It does not come down for anything else. Coming back down, of course, then we're going to do things in reverse order. So, to play our high A, our bottom hand, of course, is sitting with only the big 3 fingers on their respective hole. The little finger is off. All the fingers apart from the ring finger on the top hand are down. This is high A. As the thumb comes down, the ring finger comes off. That plays high G, and only the thumb is covering the hole at the top. Then we add our first finger for F. We add our middle finger for E. Moving back to D, we're going to do things the opposite way around this time to avoid this crossing noise. So the first thing we're going to do actually is we're going to swap out our bottom hand fingers. So the little finger is going to come down and those 3 fingers are going to come up, and then the ring finger on the top hand is going to come down. That's going to be D. Then we're adding the first finger of the bottom hand by keeping our little finger on the bottom hand on for C. Then that little finger is going to come off and the middle finger comes down for B. Then we're adding the ring finger for low A, and then we're adding the pinky again for low G. And that is the scale. That is all of the notes on the bagpipes. Now, it's really important that you take the time to get this right and practice moving up the scale. It is really important for you to commit not only the names of those notes to your memory, but also the movement of those notes and getting those fingerings spot on now, because by doing that, by spending a couple of weeks now of just constantly going through that, drilling through that, it is going to make your life immeasurably easier. The big thing, of course, again, is that when you're playing the full instrument, you cannot see your hands. So by knowing how to do that by feel, like I said, by putting your fingers on the chanter and wiggling them about to feel the ridges of the holes, you are cementing this position in your memory. By making sure that you don't lift your fingers too high up and don't move them out of the airspace of the hole will enable you to ensure that just by lifting them physically, vertically up and down, they're not going to go anywhere. You're always going to be hitting the right point, okay? And getting the actual fingering right, okay? Don't do other fingerings. Don't pretend that you should be doing it one way or the other. It's important that you get it bang on, because if that's a habit that you continue throughout and you try and pull that in a competition, that's your chances gone. So these are really fundamental things that you need to get bang on right now, but it's also going to help with your tuning. And again, I keep harping on about that, but that is something that we will come back to later on in this course. Another video for another time when you're far more comfortable with doing that. My recommendation, of course, is to go through the process of picking up the chanter, making sure that your fingers are sitting on the holes properly, making sure that everything's covered, making sure that you're doing that in a way that is not impacting the posture of your arms or your shoulders, that you're not having any difficulty covering the holes. If you think that you're playing one note and you're actually producing a note that's higher up, make sure that the holes higher up are properly covered by your fingers and that the chanter is not sitting twisted to one side or the other. That is really important. Once you've done all that and you're ensuring that you're doing things right, practice going up and down the scale. A lot of people can picture it going up easily and then they get totally lost coming back down again. Coming down is really important. And I want you to focus particularly on this D to E movement, okay? That is so important. This crossing noise that I was talking about, okay, this is really, really important. Like I said, the crossing noise, the most common place for it to happen is when moving between D and E. The reason being is because we're likely to hear a low A being thrown in there because the synchronization of the movement of the fingers jumping from one hand to the other is off. So the reason why I stress to you when moving from D up to E is to lift your E finger first and then sort your bottom hand is because that completely will eliminate any possibility of you playing low A. The reason being is that as soon as you lift that finger up, that is the only note you're going to hear. Okay, let me demonstrate that. Now obviously I can wiggle those fingers back and forward and it's having a slight impact on the pitch, but it is not changing the note from E to anything other than E very slightly flat. You're not getting a low A in there. If I don't do that first and I deliberately throw in a crossing noise, this is what you're going to hear. We're getting a sort of a b, b, b noise. You don't want that. You want a nice clean movement. And the only way to ensure that by going up from D to E is to ensure that you're opening that E hole first. The whole time that note is open, that hole is open, you've then got time to sort your bottom hand out. You will eliminate the possibility of producing a low A. Similarly, coming down from E to D, the reason why we want to open up the bottom hand first is because as soon as this hole here, which is the E hole, the D hole, as soon as this D hole is open, it doesn't matter what any of the fingers below that are doing. As soon as you close the finger on E, you're only going to hear D. But again, if we do it the other way around, we're getting that blah, blah, and it's a low A that we're hearing, or potentially a low G. So that is one to practice, and that is going to be one of your first exercises in this, is to really focus on that and get that timing right. And of course, this is something that I have included in the exercise pack that you will find a link to here. Now, one of the things that I also want to talk about now is this concept of blowing through the chanter. Unlike any other wind instrument with the pipes, because of the nature of the fact that there's always air in the bag, bagpipe music is written in such a way that there's always a note playing. There are no rests in bagpipe music. Okay, so from the start of a tune to the end of a tune, there will always be a melody note playing. If you already play another instrument, you will know exactly what that means. If you don't, then simply put, there's always going to be a note sounding. So where that poses maybe a slight complication for the beginner, of course, is that when you're on the chanter, as soon as you stop adding air to the chanter, the chanter stops making noise. Nonetheless, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to practice the chanter in a way that you're only ever providing air on a note by note basis as you play the scale, i.e. like this. No. You need to get into the habit of supplying a continuous flow of air for as long as you want to be playing for, or as long as you have air in your lungs. Of course, don't pass out when you're doing it. Okay, that's where this really starts to become different, because that's essentially how it's going to be on the pipes. Of course, the big difference with the pipes is the fact that it's not coming straight from your lungs, it's going into a bag first, so as long as there's enough air in the bag, there'll be enough air for the chanter. But when you're practicing this, don't do that. Don't go, okay? Nice steady stream of air. Okay, that's really important. Essentially, what I'm trying to get you to do here is to separate the in your brain. I want you to separate the movement of your fingers from what your lungs are doing. This is and some people really struggle with that at the beginning, but it just takes trial and error. If you find yourself doing one burst of breath per note, then stop, correct yourself. And even if you can only manage to do 2 notes in one breath, well, that's a starting point, and build it from there. But the important thing is that you do that and you learn how to provide a continuous flow of air through the chanter as you're moving your fingers. They are entirely separate movements, and the gravitas of that will become more and more apparent the closer you get to playing the pipes. Okay? But go away. I want you to concentrate on getting the fingering right. More important than anything at the moment is getting the fingering right. Think about any of the issues that you need to go through to resolve any of the problems of not pitching the right note, or you know, if you're getting a false fingering like we've talked about, go up and down the scale, get that movement cemented in your brain in both directions. Think about the names of the notes as you're doing so, and think about your breathing as well. Don't blow too hard, don't blow too soft. Like I said before, if you're getting anything like this, you're not blowing hard enough, but if it cuts out altogether, you're blowing far too hard. Okay, a nice balance in the middle. If you start to get pain in here, take a break, give it a rub, play it again. If you start to get to the point where you're actually physically drooling, stop for the day, give it a rest, go and have a cup of tea or a coffee or whatever, come back to it another time, but make sure you come back to it.